I remember that day so clearly, as if my heart refuses to forget the sound of that click. The quiet, merciless sound of him deleting our wedding photos, one after another, while I stood there frozen. I didn't even understand what was happening until it was too late. Those weren't just pictures, they were pieces of my life. The day I became his wife, the promises we made, the smiles we shared, gone, all gone, in a few seconds. It was a rainy afternoon. The house smelled of coffee and wet earth. I had just come home early from work to surprise him. I had baked his favorite cinnamon rolls. I thought maybe we'd sit together, watch our wedding video like we used to sometimes. But when I walked into the living room, he wasn't happy to see me. He barely looked up from his laptop. His voice, usually warm, felt distant, distracted. I asked him what he was doing. He said, "Just clearing some space." And I saw the screen. Folder by folder, he was deleting everything. The pictures from our honeymoon, the ones we took laughing on the beach, my veil blowing in the wind. The small moments I thought we'd cherish forever. I tried to stop him. My voice cracked as I said, What are you doing?" He didn't even pause. He just said, "They don't matter anymore, it's all old stuff." Old stuff. Just like that, he reduced our love, our vows, our memories to digital clutter. Something in my chest twisted painfully. He didn't even notice the tears building in my eyes. I asked him why. He shrugged and said, "You wouldn't understand." That sentence haunted me. You wouldn't understand. I wanted to scream, "Then help me understand!" But I couldn't. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the table to keep myself from falling apart. When I asked if something was wrong, if he was upset with me, he smiled. But it wasn't his smile. It was the kind people wear when they're hiding something behind their eyes. He said he was just tired, that he wanted to start fresh. Start fresh. From what? From me. That evening, he was quieter than usual. No playful jokes, no gentle touches, just silence. He didn't even eat the cinnamon rolls. He said he'd lost his appetite and went to bed early. I sat alone in the kitchen that night, staring at the photo frame on the counter. The one picture he hadn't deleted because it wasn't digital. It was us, smiling, holding hands, confetti still in our hair. I touched the glass gently, and for the first time, I felt like that woman in the photo was a stranger to me. She looked happy, innocent, in love. She didn't know that one day, the man standing next to her would erase her joy with a click. The next morning, he left for work earlier than usual. His cologne lingered in the hallway. That familiar scent that once comforted me now made me uneasy. I tried to brush it off, telling myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he just wanted to organize the files. But something inside me knew something wasn't right. That feeling, that ache in your chest when love starts to turn into something else. It's almost physical. You can feel it in your bones, like your soul is whispering something is breaking. That week, he became a ghost in our own home. He'd talk less, laugh less. His phone never left his hand. He'd step outside to take calls. And whenever I'd walk into the room, he'd put it down quickly, like he was hiding something. One evening, I asked him if he was seeing someone else. He laughed. Not the kind of laugh that reassures you, but the kind that mocks you for even daring to ask. He said, "You're being paranoid." Then he kissed my forehead like he was comforting a child and left the room. But the truth was already whispering through the cracks of our silence. That weekend, I noticed a name pop up on his phone. A woman's name I didn't recognize. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't have to. The way his eyes softened when he looked at that screen told me everything. He had met someone. And later I'd learned the cruelest truth of all. That the day he deleted our wedding photos was the day he met her. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He hadn't deleted them to make space on his laptop. He had deleted them to make space in his life. For her. That realization shattered me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. He didn't just fall out of love. He wiped away the evidence that our love ever existed. For days, I couldn't look at him without seeing that moment replay in my head, the calm, almost cold way he pressed delete. No hesitation, no guilt. Like our entire marriage was a mistake he could undo with a button. But what he didn't know was that some things, once deleted, don't disappear. They stay burned into your heart, like scars you carry for the rest of your life. And I promised myself that day. I might have lost those photos, but I wouldn't lose myself. Not again, not for him. Because sometimes the only thing left to hold on to after love is gone, is the strength to let go. A week passed after that day, but my mind never rested. You know that feeling when something inside you keeps whispering that you're being lied to, but your heart still begs you to believe it's all in your head. That was me. Every hour of every day, he'd leave early, come home late, smelling like a perfume I didn't wear. Not too strong, just faint, but enough for a wife to notice. Enough for my stomach to twist into knots. He'd tell me he was working overtime, yet his paychecks never changed. I wanted to trust him. I really did. But trust doesn't survive in silence. and his silence was deafening. I started to notice small things first. The way he smiled when his phone buzzed. The quick shift of his expression when I walked into the room. The extra care he suddenly put into his appearance. The shirts I hadn't seen in years were suddenly back in rotation. His cologne, the one he used to wear when we first started dating, made a sudden comeback. I asked him one night, half joking, half terrified, "Who are you trying to impress?" He chuckled and said, "My boss, obviously. I'm just trying to look professional." And maybe I wanted to believe him. Maybe it was easier than facing what my heart already knew. But fate, it never hides the truth for long. One afternoon, I stopped by his office to bring him lunch. I'd done it countless times before. But this time, when I walked in, something was different. The receptionist looked nervous when she saw me. She said he wasn't there even though his car was parked right outside. I thanked her politely and turned to leave. But before I did, I heard laughter. His laughter, coming from the break room. That laugh I hadn't heard at home in weeks. I followed the sound, quietly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. And then, I saw her. She was standing close to him, too close. They weren't touching, but they didn't have to. The way they looked at each other said it all. That soft, lingering gaze. The kind two people share when they think no one's watching. She was younger, maybe by 10 years, polished, confident, with that effortless charm that draws attention without even trying. I froze in the doorway, clutching the lunch bag in my hand. My fingers trembled so badly I almost dropped it. He saw me before she did. His eyes widened, panic flashed across his face. Then came guilt, then came the lie. "Oh, honey, you didn't tell me you were coming," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I looked at her. She smiled politely, the kind of smile you give a stranger. Except her eyes were smug, like she'd already knew something I didn't, like she'd already claimed what was once mine. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't shout or cry. I just placed the lunch on the table and said quietly, "You left your photos at home, so I thought I'd bring you something else you forgot." He blinked, confused. But I wasn't talking about lunch. I was talking about us. The life he'd deleted. The love he'd thrown away. I walked out without looking back. My chest was burning, my eyes stung, but I held my head high until I reached my car. Then I broke. I cried until the windows fogged up, until the steering wheel felt like the only thing holding me together. That night he came home late. He didn't apologize, didn't explain, just acted like nothing happened, like I hadn't seen what I saw, like I hadn't watched him share smiles with another woman while our marriage crumbled quietly in the background. When I asked him who she was, he said, "Just a friend from work." A friend. Funny how that word can sound so harmless, until it destroys everything. Days went by and his behavior didn't change. If anything, he became bolder. He'd spend hours texting, his phone glued to his hand. When I'd ask what was so important, he'd say, "Work stuff, you wouldn't get it." One evening, I finally did something I swore I'd never do. I checked his phone. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate. I needed to know if I was crazy or if my world was truly falling apart. And there it was, messages, dozens of them. Her name flashing on the screen, accompanied by words that stabbed like knives. "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was perfect. Wish she wasn't home so we could talk more." I dropped the phone. My heart felt like it had stopped. The walls closed in around me. It wasn't just an affair, it was emotional murder. He had replaced me in every way that mattered. When he came out of the shower, I was sitting on the bed, phone in my hand. He froze. Then, instead of guilt, I saw annoyance. As if I was the problem. He said, "You shouldn't have gone through my phone." I whispered, "You shouldn't have given me a reason to." For a second he looked almost ashamed, but it didn't last. He sighed and said, "It just happened, okay? She understands me. We connect. You've changed." Those words, "You've changed," they cut deeper than any betrayal. Because I had changed. I'd changed for him. I'd worked extra hours to support him when he lost his job. I'd given up dreams to build his. And yet, here I was, watching him talk about connection with another woman. I asked him one question. When did it start? He hesitated, then said, "The day I met her." And that's when it hit me like lightning. The day he met her was the day he deleted our wedding photos. He didn't even deny it. He said it so casually, like it was a coincidence. But we both knew it wasn't. That was his way of making room for her, erasing the evidence of me. I stared at him, trying to understand how love could rot so quickly, how a man who once cried at our vows could now look me in the eyes and feel nothing. He said he needed space to think. I told him he'd already made space, by deleting our memories, our photos, and now me. He packed a bag that night and left. I didn't stop him. I just watched numb as the door closed behind him. The house felt colder instantly. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt like his footsteps returning. But they never did. The bed felt too big, the silence too loud. Then one evening, a message popped up on my phone. From a number I didn't recognize. It said, "You deserve better than him." I didn't know who it was from, but somehow I felt it might have been from her. The woman he left me for. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe pity. Either way, it was the final insult. Because I didn't need her pity. I didn't need his excuses. What I needed was closure. But closure doesn't come wrapped in explanations or apologies. It comes the moment you stop waiting for either. And that night, as I stood by the window, looking out at the rain, the same kind of rain that fell the day he deleted our photos, I whispered to myself, he can delete the pictures, but he'll never delete the truth. The first few mornings after he left were the hardest. The silence was unbearable. It wasn't just the absence of his voice. It was the echo of all the things he used to say, all the laughter that used to fill this house. It felt like the walls themselves were grieving. I'd wake up and instinctively reach for the other side of the bed, cold, empty, like a cruel reminder that I was alone again. I kept telling myself he's gone, let him go. But the truth was, I didn't know how to let go of someone who had been my entire world. When you build your life around someone, their absence feels like the collapse of a home, and you're left standing in the ruins, wondering what to save and what to burn. For days, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I'd just sit in the living room, staring at the empty space where his laptop used to be, the same spot where he'd deleted our wedding photos. Sometimes I swore I could still hear that faint click. The sound that changed everything. I started avoiding mirrors. Because every time I looked, I didn't see me. I saw a stranger, a woman with swollen eyes and a trembling lip. A woman who once thought she was loved beyond measure, and was now learning how easily love can vanish. People talk about heartbreak like it's poetic. But it's not. It's physical. It hurts in your chest, in your stomach, in your bones. It makes breathing feel like a chore. Friends called, family checked in, but I couldn't talk about it. Not yet. Not until I understood how something so real could disappear so easily. One afternoon I went to our closet. Half of it was empty now. His clothes, his shoes, his scent, all gone. But on the top shelf, buried beneath some old boxes, I found something. An old photo album, not the digital kind, a real one. The kind you hold in your hands. It had photos from before the wedding, our first trip together, our engagement, our families laughing side by side. And for a second, I felt a strange relief. He hadn't deleted everything. As I flipped through the pages, I could almost hear our younger selves laughing. The way he used to look at me, like I was his whole world. And the cruel irony hit me. How could that same man erase the very proof of our love? That night, I decided to do something different. Instead of crying, I printed new photos. Not of us, but of me. Pictures from before I met him. My college graduation. My first job. The little victories that belonged only to me. I realized something that night. Before him, I had a life. A full one. And somewhere along the way, I let him become the center of it. I forgot that I was someone before I became his wife. So I started to reclaim her. The woman I used to be. I cleaned the house, changed the sheets, rearranged the furniture. Every corner that once screamed slowly began to whisper, me. It was painful, but freeing. Then one morning, I got a call. It was from a mutual friend, someone who worked with him. She hesitated before saying, "I thought you should know he's already moved in with her." I didn't react. I just said, "Thank you," and hung up. The truth didn't hurt anymore, not in the same way. It stung, yes, but it didn't break me. Because by then, I had started to understand something powerful. His actions were a reflection of him, not me. He deleted the photos because he couldn't face the man he used to be. The one who loved honestly. That's what guilt does. It makes people erase evidence. Meanwhile, I began writing. At first, just journaling. Then, stories. I poured every emotion, every tear into words. It became therapy, my way of processing the wreckage he left behind. Weeks passed. Slowly, the ache dulled. The silence became peaceful instead of haunting. I started enjoying my coffee alone. I rediscovered the joy of sleeping diagonally across the bed. I went out with friends again. I even smiled. A real smile, the kind that doesn't hurt. And then one day I got an email. From him. The subject line read, "Do you still have any of our wedding photos?" My hands trembled as I read it. He wrote that his new relationship wasn't working out, that he missed the simplicity we had, that he regretted deleting the photos because they were part of our story. For a moment I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He wanted back what he had thrown away. But here's the thing. I no longer had those photos. Not because he deleted them, but because I didn't need them anymore. So I replied, "No, I don't have them. You already deleted that part of your life. And I've learned to live without it." He didn't respond. Later, I found out that the woman he left me for had left him. Just like that, the same cycle. She got bored, moved on, and he was left standing where I once stood, abandoned, confused, trying to piece together what went wrong. Life has a strange sense of justice. What you erase in someone else's life eventually fades from yours too. But me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. So I did something symbolic. I took the empty picture frames from our old wedding wall and filled them with new photos. Of sunsets, books I loved, the view from my solo trip to the mountains. A wall of rebirth, not of regret. Every picture was a reminder. He deleted our memories, but he couldn't delete my resilience. And slowly I began to understand. Maybe life deletes people for us when we're too afraid to do it ourselves. He deleted our wedding photos to make space for her. I deleted him from my heart to make space for me. And that was the most beautiful restoration I could ever have imagined. I still keep that old photo album though, not to mourn what was lost, but to remember what I survived. Because sometimes, strength doesn't come from what you hold on to. It comes from what you finally let go of. It had been almost 6 months since he walked out of my life. 6 months since that night I watched him close the door and take my old world with him. 6 months since I rebuilt myself from the ashes he left behind. By then, I wasn't the same woman he'd abandoned. The tears had dried. The trembling in my voice had turned into calm. My pain had turned into quiet power. I'd learned to sleep alone without reaching for a ghost. I'd learned that healing isn't about forgetting someone. It's about remembering yourself. I had a new job, a smaller apartment. But it was mine. Everything in that space reflected me. My colors, my music, my peace. There were plants by the window, candles that smelled like vanilla and cedar, and laughter again. My laughter, not borrowed from someone else's mood. And then one Sunday afternoon he came back. It was raining, just like the day he deleted our wedding photos. Maybe the universe likes irony. I was making tea when I heard the knock. It wasn't frantic or hesitant. It was familiar, too familiar. For a moment I froze. My heart did that thing where it forgets the present and remembers the past. That split second of old habit, of wanting to run to the door, smile, say you're home. But this wasn't home anymore, not for him. When I opened the door, there he was. The same face, the same eyes, but different somehow. Smaller, dimmer. Like someone who had been walking too long in circles, chasing a happiness he thought he'd already found. He smiled softly. You look good. I didn't answer. I just stood there holding the door, waiting for him to explain why he was here. He shifted awkwardly, looked at his shoes. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to face whatever ghosts were left. He walked in slowly, his eyes scanning the apartment. I saw the flicker of surprise when he realized how different everything was. No wedding pictures, no traces of him, just me. This place feels peaceful, he said quietly. It is, I replied. He sat down on the edge of the sofa like a stranger visiting a museum of his own mistakes. After a long silence, he finally spoke. I messed up. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Too late. He went on. She wasn't who I thought she was. It ended months ago. I thought maybe we could talk, maybe try again. A try again. Those 2 words hit me like ice. I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man I didn't recognize anymore. Not because he'd changed, but because I had. I said quietly, do you even remember the day you deleted our wedding photos? He looked down. Yes. Do you remember what you said when I asked why? He hesitated. I said they didn't matter anymore. I nodded. You were right. They don't. He winced, as if my calm hurt more than anger ever could. He started rambling about mistakes, confusion, how he wasn't himself. Back then, how he thought she was his soulmate. How he realized too late that I was the one who truly loved him. And I listened, not out of hope, but closure. Every word he said was like confirmation that I'd made the right choice by walking away emotionally long before he walked away physically. He reached for my hand. I've missed you, he whispered. For a moment, I remembered all the nights I cried for those exact words. I'd begged the universe to make him say them. And now that he did, they felt empty. I pulled my hand away gently. You didn't miss me. You missed the version of yourself you were when I loved you. He stared at me, confused. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, my voice steady, that you don't miss us. You miss being loved unconditionally. You miss being forgiven. You miss the safety of someone who saw the best in you, even when you showed her the worst. He looked down, his voice breaking. I made a mistake. I nodded again. Yes, but the mistake wasn't leaving. The mistake was thinking you could come back and find the same woman waiting for you. He was quiet after that, completely still. The only sound was the rain tapping against the windows, like soft applause for the truth finally spoken aloud. After a while, he said, I just thought maybe we could start over. A new chapter. I smiled sadly. You deleted the first book. There's nothing left to continue from. He exhaled sharply, his composure cracking. So that's it? After everything we had? I met his eyes. You don't get to use the word anymore. He closed his eyes, like the words cut deeper than he expected. But I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I stood up and said, I hope you find peace, I really do. But not here. He stood too, looking lost, like a man who'd come home to find it sold to someone else, which in a way it had been sold back to me. As he walked to the door, he paused. You really don't have any of the photos left. I smiled faintly. No, but I have something better. He frowned. What? Memories of who I became after you left. And with that, I opened the door. He looked at me one last time, as if trying to memorize the woman he once knew. But she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, quieter, wiser. When he stepped out, the rain hit him hard. I watched him walk away, his figure fading into the gray. For a moment, I felt a pang. Not of longing, but of gratitude. Because he taught me something I never would have learned otherwise. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting someone lose you. When I closed the door behind him, the silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt like freedom. I made myself another cup of tea, sat by the window, and smiled as I watched the rain. The same rain that once symbolized endings now felt like cleansing. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, he deleted our wedding photos. But he couldn't delete my rebirth. After he walked out that rainy afternoon, something inside me settled. It wasn't joy, not yet, but peace. The kind of peace that comes after a storm has destroyed everything, and you're finally standing in the quiet, realizing you survived. I didn't cry this time. I didn't replay the moment or wonder if I should have said more. I just made myself another cup of tea and sat by the window, listening to the rain wash away what was left of the past. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No nightmares, no memories clawing at me. Just sleep, deep, dreamless, peaceful. The next morning, I woke up with sunlight on my face. It felt symbolic somehow, like a new chapter had already begun, one I didn't have to share with anyone but myself. For the first time, I looked at my reflection and didn't see the woman who was left behind. I saw a woman who chose herself. I started focusing on small things again, things I had stopped noticing when I was too busy loving someone who didn't love me back. The smell of freshly baked bread from the cafe down the street. The sound of laughter from children playing in the park nearby. The comfort of silence without tension. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before our wedding. Back then, he used to say, you'll have time for hobbies later. Right now we need to build a future. Funny how our future had really just been his. So I painted, with no plan, no pressure, just color, emotion, freedom. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a part of myself he'd once made me silence. And slowly, those paintings became a reflection of my journey. One canvas was called The Deletion, a swirl of dark blues and fading golds, grief and release. Another was Rebirth, full of reds and yellows like fire and sunrise mixed together. I didn't realize it then, but those paintings were my therapy. One afternoon, my friend Layla came over. She had been there through it all, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the silence. She looked at the paintings and said, you should exhibit these. I laughed. Who would want to see my pain hanging on a wall? She smiled. Maybe someone who needs to know that healing is possible. Her words stayed with me. Weeks later, she convinced me to put a few pieces in a local art gallery's open exhibit. It wasn't fancy, just a small community space. But standing there surrounded by my work, I felt proud for the first time in a long time. People stopped and looked, asked questions, connected. And then, one man lingered. He stood quietly in front of The Deletion. For a long time, I noticed his eyes, thoughtful, kind, but with a heaviness that suggested he understood what pain looked like. When he turned to me, he said softly, it's beautiful. Sad but freeing. I smiled. That's exactly what it was meant to be. He introduced himself. Daniel. He was a photographer who'd been documenting stories of resilience. He asked me about my work, my inspiration, my story. I didn't give him details, not at first. I just said, it's about losing everything you thought you needed and realizing you didn't need it at all. He nodded as if he understood perfectly. Over the next few weeks, we crossed paths again, at cafes, art events, and once at the park. We talked easily. He never pried, never pushed. He listened, really listened. Something my ex-husband never did. One day, he said something that struck me deeply. People think love is about permanence, but sometimes it's about presence. Being fully there, even if it's temporary. That sentence stayed with me. Because he was right. My ex-husband had been permanent for years, but absent. Daniel was still new, still uncertain, but fully present. We started spending more time together. Simple things, walking, sharing stories, laughing. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. Not because he tried to impress me, but because he made me feel safe enough to be myself. One evening, as we watched the sunset by the water, he said, you look at the world like someone who's seen it fall apart and still believes in beauty. I smiled softly. That's because I have. He didn't ask what happened. He just nodded, respecting the silence. That night, I realized something. Love doesn't always enter your life with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly, gently, like a tide returning to the shore. But this wasn't about falling in love again. It was about learning that love didn't die when my marriage did. It just changed forms. It became self-respect. It became peace. It became laughter shared with someone who didn't need to own me to value me. A few months later, Daniel asked if he could photograph me for his resilience project. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to be seen like that. But he said, not as the woman who was hurt, but as the woman who healed. That's how I ended up standing in front of his camera, wearing a simple white dress, surrounded by my own paintings. No makeup, no pretense. Just me, raw, honest, real. When I saw the final photograph, I cried. Not out of sadness, but recognition. The woman in that photo had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, yet her eyes still held light. Daniel submitted the photo to an exhibition titled Resilience. It won a small award. The night of the ceremony, he introduced me to people as the artist who turned pain into power. And for once, I didn't feel like the woman who'd been left. I felt like the woman who had left behind what no longer served her. A few days later, my ex texted again. He said he'd seen the article about the exhibit. He congratulated me and wrote, "I'm proud of you." I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because his approval no longer mattered. That's when I realized I was finally free. Truly, completely free. Because freedom isn't just about being without someone. It's about no longer needing their validation. I framed that photo Daniel took, not as a symbol of new love, but as proof of rebirth. I hung it in the same spot where my wedding photos once were. It wasn't revenge. It was redemption. Every time I looked at it, I remembered how far I'd come. From the woman who cried over deleted memories to the woman who created new ones, brighter, stronger, and real. And maybe someday I'll fall in love again. Maybe with Daniel, maybe not. But this time I'll know the truth. That love doesn't complete me. It meets me where I already stand whole. Because the day he deleted our wedding photos, he didn't just end our story, he unknowingly began mine. When I walked into that grand gallery, I could almost hear the echo of my old life fading behind me. It had been nearly a year since my ex-husband, had deleted our wedding photos. Since then, I'd built something new. Not a perfect life, not yet, but a peaceful one. And that night, standing in that glowing gallery full of art and stories of survival, I realized peace can be louder than pain. My painting, Rebirth, hung beside the photograph Daniel had taken, my face captured in raw light, surrounded by colors of my own making. The label beneath read artist Amara Khan. Titled The Woman Who Painted Her Freedom. The room was full. Reporters, collectors, strangers who knew nothing of my story but felt its weight through the art. They didn't need to know the details. The emotion said it all. Daniel squeezed my hand. "You did this?" he whispered. I smiled, though my heart pounded. "We did this." He shook his head softly. "No, you healed yourself. I just watched." I was about to respond when I heard it, that voice. Familiar. Cold, once so loved, now just distant. "Amara!" I froze. I turned. There he was, Ethan. My ex-husband. The man who had once promised me forever, only to erase our past like a file he no longer needed. He looked smaller somehow. The confidence that once defined him had faded into something brittle. His hair was grayer, his smile forced. He approached cautiously, his eyes flicking to the photo on the wall. My face. Then to me. "I saw the article," he said. "I had to come see for myself." I took a slow breath. "You didn't have to." You looked at the photo again. "You look different." "I am different." He gave a quiet laugh. "You were always talented. I didn't realize how much." Of course he didn't. Back then my worth only existed in how much I could make his life easier, not how much light I had in my own. He studied the artwork. "So this is about me." I met his eyes. "No, this is about me." He hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "I didn't come here to upset you." "You didn't?" I said calmly. "You just reminded me why I'm here." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Amara, I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I echoed softly. "You didn't lose your keys, Ethan. You deleted our memories?" He looked down. I was angry, confused. I thought I was doing what was right at the time. I wanted to ask, right for who? But I didn't need to. His silence answered it. He swallowed. "She left me, you know." "The woman I know." I cut in gently. "You told me once." "And I told you then. I hoped you'd find peace, did you?" He shook his head, eyes glistening. "No, I thought I would. But every time I tried to start over, something felt missing." "That's because you were chasing comfort," I said quietly, "not love." He opened his mouth to reply, but Daniel walked up beside me. Ethan's eyes flicked to him immediately. "And you are?" "Daniel," he said simply. "Photographer." "Friend?" The way he said friend, steady, confident, protective, made my heart flutter. Ethan nodded stiffly. "Of course." He looked between us, realization dawning. So you've moved on. I smiled faintly. I moved forward. He exhaled, defeated. You always did handle things better than I did. I tilted my head. No. I just stopped breaking myself to fix you. There was silence. The kind that speaks louder than shouting ever could. Finally, he said, you know I came here expecting to see my mistake. But all I see is what I lost. For the first time I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. I looked at him and said softly, you didn't lose me, Ethan. You let me go. There's a difference. He blinked, eyes glimmering. Can we at least talk sometime? Catch up. I smiled politely. There's nothing left to catch up on. And with that, I turned away, not out of cruelty, but peace. True, quiet peace. As Daniel and I walked to the other side of the gallery, I felt the weight of years dissolve. The betrayal, the humiliation, the heartbreak, gone. Because I wasn't his story anymore. I was my own masterpiece. Later that night, as the event ended, I found myself standing before my photograph again. The woman who painted her freedom. A few guests came by, complimenting the emotion in the work. One older woman said, it feels like you've lived through storms and still found sunlight. I smiled. That's exactly what it is. When the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, I stood there for a moment longer, letting the silence sink in. Daniel came beside me, slipping his arm around my shoulders. He looked at you like a ghost from his past, Daniel murmured. I chuckled softly. Because I am. A part of me died back then. And I'm glad it did. He studied my profile, the soft glow of the gallery lights painting my face. So what happens now? I turned to him, eyes shining. Now I live? Fully, loudly, without apology. He smiled. And your next painting? I grinned. It'll be called The Woman Who Stopped Waiting. He laughed, that deep, genuine kind of laugh that fills the air like music. And I realized something. I wasn't just healed. I was awake. The next day, a photo of the exhibit made it to the newspaper. My face, my art, my story. The caption read, local artist transforms heartbreak into hope, inspires hundreds. I received messages from women all over the world, women who had been betrayed, silenced, abandoned. They said my story gave them courage. That's when I knew. This wasn't just my healing. It was my mission, to tell the stories we hide, to speak the pain we bury, to remind every woman who's been broken that she can rebuild, not into who she was, but into who she was always meant to be. That's how The Woman Who Painted Her Freedom became a movement. Art classes, talks, exhibits, healing circles. And as I stood before each new audience, I always said the same thing. He deleted our photos, but I found something far greater. Myself. I never planned to go viral. It started with one video, a short clip of my speech at the gallery. Someone in the audience had filmed it on their phone and posted it with the caption, "She's the woman whose husband deleted her wedding photos. Now she's the artist who painted her freedom." Within 2 days, it had millions of views. My inbox overflowed with messages, women, men, even teenagers, saying they cried watching it. They said it reminded them that pain doesn't have to end in bitterness, that heartbreak can be the soil where strength grows. My face, my words, my art, all over social media. Podcasts invited me to speak. Magazines called me the woman who rebuilt herself. But with that attention came something else, a ghost from my past. Ethan. It started small. A message request I didn't open. Then another. Then a post he made online. Proud of the woman I once loved. We both made mistakes, but I'm glad she's found herself again. The comments poured in. Some called him mature for showing support. Others tagged me asking, "Do you forgive him now?" Forgive him. The irony made me laugh, not out of joy but disbelief. Because the same man who once erased our memories was now trying to stand beside my name to cleanse his own. A week later, a journalist reached out. "Would love to do a joint interview. Your ex-husband's willing to talk about your healing journey together." Together. That word made me flinch. I typed my response carefully. There is no together. There never will be. But the requests didn't stop. TV producers, magazine editors, even a documentary offer. Everyone wanted the closure story, the reunion, the redemption arc. They didn't understand. My closure wasn't about him. It was about me. And then one morning my phone buzzed again. This time Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "Have you seen this?" he asked, voice tight. He sent a link. A video Ethan had posted. In it, Ethan sat in front of a camera, pretending to be humble, remorseful, reflective. His words were carefully rehearsed. "I made a mistake years ago. I deleted our wedding photos in anger, not realizing what I was truly deleting. A part of myself. She's an amazing woman, and I'll always support her success." I watched it silently, my chest tightening, not from sadness, but from the familiar manipulation wrapped in self-pity. He wasn't apologizing to me. He was performing. That evening, I sat in my art studio, surrounded by canvases painted in fire and healing, and decided I wouldn't let him rewrite my story, not again. So, the next day I posted my own video. No music, no edits, just me. A single light, a steady voice. When someone deletes your memories, they think they've erased your power. But what they really erase is their own reflection in your life. I don't need a joint interview. I don't need shared closure. My story isn't about revenge. It's about rebirth. Forgiveness doesn't mean opening the door again. It means closing it with peace. The video hit 5 million views overnight. People called it the speech of the year. And for the first time, the world saw not the victim, but the victor. That same week, I launched my campaign, Fenshi Rewrites Her Story, inviting women to share one thing they reclaimed after betrayal. The response was overwhelming, thousands of posts, paintings, letters, songs. It became a movement bigger than me. One woman wrote, "Hey, burned my journals, so I started writing again." Another said, "He called me worthless. Now I own the company he worked for." It was no longer my story, it was our story, and in that tidal wave of shared strength, Ethan's voice faded into irrelevance. He tried one last time, sending me an email. "I'm sorry for how I hurt you. I just want a chance to talk, to say goodbye properly." I stared at it for a long time. Once upon a time I would have answered immediately. I would have searched for closure in his words. But now I didn't need it. The silence between us was the closure. I deleted the email. No anger, no tears. Just calm, because when a woman rebuilds herself, she stops living in the ruins others left behind. Weeks later, I stood on a stage, this time at a global women's summit. The lights were bright, the room full of faces, and my story was now a symbol of strength for thousands. As I spoke, I looked out into the audience and saw people crying, nodding, whispering to each other. I realized then, healing isn't just personal, it's contagious, I said. He deleted our wedding photos. But in doing so, he gave me something priceless, the space to create new ones. Pictures not of a bride but of a woman who stood back up, a woman who paints her scars into art, a woman who realized her worth isn't defined by who stays, but by who she becomes when they leave. The audience stood and applauded, not for tragedy, but for transformation. As the lights dimmed, I looked to the side of the stage. Daniel stood there, smiling, proud, quiet, steady. Later that night, as we walked under city lights, I said, "It's strange, isn't it? The man who deleted our photos gave me the story that changed my life." Daniel laughed softly. "That's the thing about pain. It's the world's most honest teacher." I smiled. And I finally learned the lesson. We stopped at a cafe, sat by the window, and I looked outside, at people rushing by, at life moving forward. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by the past. I felt anchored in the present. A few months later, I released my first book. He deleted our wedding photos. But he couldn't delete me. It became a bestseller within weeks. Not because it was tragic, but because it was true. And in every book signing, I wrote the same message on the first page. You are not what they erased. You are what survived. That's the legacy of my story. He deleted our wedding photos, but I created a life so bright, so full, that no photo could ever capture it. And that's the ending I chose for myself. Not revenge, not reunion, just peace. Because sometimes, the woman who was once erased becomes the one the world can't forget. They invited me to speak at a global women's summit in New York. A stage I never imagined standing on. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's heartbreak, but as someone's inspiration. When I walked out that evening, the lights hit my face like a sunrise, bright, warm, forgiving. The applause was thunderous, but I didn't hear noise, I heard healing. It had been 2 years since he deleted our wedding photos. 2 years since my world shattered and reassembled into something far stronger. As I stood there, facing thousands of women, mothers, daughters, survivors, dreamers, I took a deep breath. And I said, 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought the deletion of a few photos meant the erasure of everything I was. But I learned something powerful. You can delete pictures, not the person in them. You can walk away from love, but not from destiny. You can lose everything and still find yourself. The room was silent. You could hear hearts beating, tears falling quietly, hope resurfacing. I continued, my voice steady, almost whispering. The day he deleted our photos, I broke. But I didn't stay broken. I gathered the fragments, glued them together with courage, and realized the cracks made me shine brighter. Behind me, a large screen displayed one image. My painting Rebirth, surrounded by colors of sunrise and storm. It glowed like a heartbeat in the dark. I used to think my worth lived in someone else's eyes, in their validation, their promises, their love, but I was wrong. My worth was always here. I placed a hand over my heart, waiting for me to come home. Someone in the front row stood and started clapping, then another, then hundreds, but I raised my hand softly, asking them to wait. Let me finish, I said with a smile, because this isn't a sad story. This is a resurrection. The lights dimmed slightly, and I told them the truth. Not the viral version but the raw one. Yes, he left. Yes, I cried until my body gave up. Yes, I begged for closure that never came. But if I hadn't been left alone in that darkness, I never would have learned how to light my own fire. The crowd listened in complete stillness. Every woman there had her own version of deleted photos. Betrayal, rejection, loss, grief. And I could feel it, their unspoken stories trembling in the air. So I said what I wished someone had told me back then. You don't have to be perfect to deserve peace. You don't have to be loved to feel whole. You don't need closure to move on. You just need to choose yourself. Every single day, until your reflection feels like home again. By the time I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. But it wasn't sadness anymore, it was release. After the talk, women lined up to hug me. One whispered, "He left me too, and tonight, I think I finally let him go." Another said, "I'm going to paint again." That's when I realized I hadn't just healed myself. I'd started a ripple. That night, as the event ended and the hall emptied, I stayed behind for a moment, standing alone under the soft lights. The screen still showed my painting. The woman in it looked strong, unshakable, free. And as I looked at her, I thought back to the girl I once was, crying over a hard drive full of deleted memories. If she could see me now, she'd smile through her tears. She'd say, "We made it." I whispered quietly to the empty room. He deleted our photos, but I became unforgettable. Later, as I left the building, snow began to fall, soft, silent, endless. New beginnings falling from the sky. Daniel was waiting outside, leaning against the car, camera in hand. He grinned. "You were incredible." I smiled. "You filmed it?" "Of course," he said. "The world needs to hear that again." I laughed softly, "Maybe. But tonight, I just want quiet." He nodded. "You've earned it." As we drove through the snowy streets, city lights reflecting on the windows, I thought of Ethan. Somewhere out there, watching my life from afar. And for the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt gratitude. Because if he hadn't deleted those photos, I might still be living in the frame of a life that wasn't mine. A few months later, my story was turned into a documentary. It was called The Woman Who Couldn't Be Deleted. The opening scene showed a simple image, a blank screen, then a single line appearing, letter by letter. He deleted our wedding photos. But not my story. The film ended with my voice narrating over a montage of my art, my laughter, and women around the world painting their own rebirths. This isn't about loss. It's about transformation. I was erased once, but when I came back in color. When it premiered, people stood and clapped for 10 minutes straight. But I wasn't thinking of the applause. I was thinking of that girl sitting in a dark apartment, holding her breath in heartbreak. If only she knew that her pain would one day heal others. Today I keep one photo on my wall. Not from our wedding, not from our past. It's a picture Daniel took of me holding a paintbrush, sunlight on my face, colors splashed across my hands. Beneath it, a single line reads, "Unbroken, unapologetic, unforgettable." Because that's who I became, not the woman he loved, but the woman he lost. And that, I realized, is the quiet revenge of healing. You stop wanting to be seen by the one who left because the whole world sees you now. So if anyone ever asks me how I survived, I'll tell them the truth. He deleted our wedding photos. But in doing so, he gave me a blank canvas, and on it, I painted my freedom.